And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you a very, very special guest to my fellow Idahoans, Dr. Loel Fenwick. Dr. Fenwick, welcome to my fellow Idahoans.
Well, welcome. I'm glad to be here, Joe.
This is the Morning 650 HR birth chair. This comfortable, reassuring bed is the result of collaboration between physicians, nurses, and healthcare professionals striving to develop the ideal system for today's parents.
Reaching for the hand control.
I started with him in '79, so it was early '80s.
Yeah.
There was a lot of controversy from the local doctors because of who is this guy from South Africa who is wanting to change obstetrics.
And so I developed a system whereby the parents would be able to remain in the same room in a birthing room suite where they could be with their family and their baby and have a normal birth experience with people who are trained to look after their emotional and social needs as well as keeping the birth process normal. I invented the birthing bed, we developed that program and implemented it in about 400 hospitals around the United States.
When I first met Loel, I didn't know who he was, what he did. The first thing he did, though, was he took me to Warning, to the corporation, to show me what he does and how excited he was about it. And here was a factory that was making his dream come true. And then we would go to a social event. And I would hear them say, "So what do you do?" And he would tell them, "Oh, I'm a delivery boy." And I just want to sing his praises and say, "No."
You know, my dad had to work incredibly hard to be able to get into med school and then to be able to pay for med school and work his way through that. And from the way I understand it, always had this dream of coming to America eventually.
And so now I think I bet every hospital in the United States maybe has a boarding bed or a prototype of a boarding bed. And I'm just so pleased that I was part of that process. It was dynamic. He totally changed obstetrics.
I did my medical training at the University of Cape Town. It was probably the best hospital in Africa. Only people who had their babies there were the ones who were having trouble having their babies at home, and they'd be looked after by nurse midwives. Well, the nurse midwives were amazing women, and to be able to tell very accurately how that birth was proceeding. Everything changed if the mother had to go to the hospital.
There is a table with sterile drapes to cover your abdomen.
She would leave this environment of women supporting her. She was taken into an area that was, for most women, very scary. It looked different, it smelled different, it had all of these stainless steel instruments across there. And then it became really a surgical procedure.
There will also be various sorts of anesthetics.
When I came to the United States, that's exactly what they were doing. It was a very, very strange system for me, because I could see in time that the great majority of women who came in really didn't need all of the interventions that they had, including the vast majority of women who were totally healthy. So here we are. This is all. So these are sort of things. You know, here's the bed, and here's the woman, and those are the positions that they can put her in. These show what actually happens. How, when she sits forward, how it brings the baby, instead of lying flat on her, it drops it forward. And so there's a more direct route for the baby to come out, like this. And they would have control of the bed, and they could change the shape of it by pushing little buttons and making that work. And so now women will be able to do all the things that they could do naturally, but now it was on a piece of medical equipment, which made it okay. The doctors had a protocol. They had to be signed off on how to use it. So now it was okay. It wasn't like sitting on the floor. And so that made it possible for women to be able to birth more naturally all over the country.
The sales of the bed, it just kept growing and growing and growing. We had a lot of nurse practitioners, family physicians who were very interested in this whole new concept. And his whole idea was that women should have a part of the delivery, not just the physician delivering. You know, the woman was in charge. So I want you to be educated. I want you to learn about the process you're going through. And I think more and more people are going that way. There have been, I don't know, he jokes about there have been 80 million babies born on my bed. Also, he developed the stablet, where as soon as the baby's born, and then moved over for the vital signs, and then back to the mom, not taken to the nursery.
He must have only been about 30 when he looked at how babies were being born here.
All right, now that part's your responsibility for the next 21 years. There you go.
And to bring doctors and hospitals and nurses on board was going to be a challenge, because like anything, change is hard for a lot of people to understand. And by the time I met him, he had done it so quickly, over just a few years. And I felt very lucky that it was probably the most important thing that Loel and I have ever shared in our life, was having our 4 children, just the 2 of us.
I'd been talking about single-room maternity care for some time back then, and talking about physiologic childbirth, and I'd been writing articles about it. I would encourage these women to walk and sit and squat, and I'd show them how to do all of these things. And of course, every now and then, so the door would open and in would come a nurse, and here would be somebody squatting on the floor, and the word got out, you know, this weird guy from Africa, we got to do something about him.
I always had this pretty built up perspective of what I needed to do in my career before I was ready to go have kids. You know, I felt like I needed to do kind of as much as my dad did, which, you know, I kind of started to realize eventually that my dad's pretty unique in the things that he was able to achieve. And you know, and ultimately it was time for us to kind of have that next adventure. Amy and I got married 5 years ago. And we found out we were pregnant with Charlie. She was pregnant with Charlie last year. And it was just the most exciting thing. You know, Amy's just an incredible person, an incredible mom. One of the neat things about having Charlie right now is that I know that Charlie gets to spend time with, you know, her grandpa. Everything that I want for Charlie is what I had growing up, as far as the support that I had from my dad, you know, and being up here at Priest Lake and being around aviation. My dad's been flying with us since we were all super young. You know, I think my little sister gets the record of flying with my mom when she's 3 days old.
I never thought about flying, never thought about flying. I started flying really because Loel wanted to start flying again. He had flown in South Africa, but he started taking lessons right away to get his American pilot's license. My first flight with Loel was me as the pilot. We studied flying together and really started off together. And that's really what led us to Priest Lake.